What's up, man?
Hey, how you doing, buddy?
I am doing good, man.
I'm so glad to see this background. That's awesome.
Listen, I love it. I see you got one. You got your stuff. Your nice background and everything looks good, man.
Yeah, thanks, brother. I just re-outfitted the home studio. So I've got 3-point lighting and a proper green screen. And I was
I need to
playing
get
with
the 3-point lighting. I'm on natural lighting right now, but the 3-point lighting I have not secured yet.
it's, man, what a difference maker.
That's what I hear. Look at that. I love me some books, man.
Filling up in the library, dude.
Listen, we're so crazy. We could jump right into it, but just started a new book. It's called, hold on, let me make sure I don't butcher this title. Where is it? It's called Your Next 5 Moves by Patrick Bet-David. You ever heard of him?
No. Patrick
He's
David?
Patrick Bet-David. So Bet-David is his last name.
Okay.
But I've heard of him. Obviously, anybody who knows me knows I'm a huge Kevin Hart fan, right? Yeah. So he interviewed Kevin Hart, and then he hired Kevin Hart to come speak at some function that he was doing for his team. Like he has a company, a bunch of agents. I think they sell life insurance, but they do it in like a cool way or something.
Cool.
So he brought in Kevin Hart, and what I was blown away by was that here I am, a fan of Kevin Hart, and here's a guy who had enough money to pay his fee to speak in person. And I think I was doing some research, and I think it starts off at $100,000, like to be able to pay him.
Wow.
To come speak at your event. And so when I saw Patrick Bet-David, what he did, I don't know how you negotiated this, but he had I think this is probably one of the longest interviews Kevin Hart has ever done. It was probably like close to 2 hours.
Wow.
That they were talking. And then he came and spoke at the guy's event.
Wow.
So I heard of him. I said, let me go and look at this. And I saw like, there's an app that's called Libby. And in New York City, there's a partnership where you can get access to these books for free, audio books, downloadable books. So I got it. I saw his name. It was available. I downloaded it.
Oh, sweet.
So far it's good, man. I'm liking the story. It's interesting because one of the things he said early on was that he had a camera, like a Canon Rebel or something. And he started his YouTube channel, and he had like at the end of the year one, they had like 60 subscribers. Now, I think he said he's at 150,000 subscribers, or maybe even 1 million. I got to double check, but he's now at millions. People, the growth and all the different things that's been happening with it. And so I brought it up because I know we're doing this, and it's completely random. So just so people could get context of what that actually, how did that actually come about? So obviously I met B Love back in January 2020, right? It was this year.
This year.
So it was January 2020. I go to Chicago, and that we were all a part of this organization called NSLC, so National Student Leadership Conference. Right. And I got there and I wanted to learn how to become better at facilitating. Like, I'm a great orator. I can speak, but the facilitation part was like something that I wanted to learn more of. And so B Love was there. And it was interesting because when I was meeting so many people there, they kept calling someone B Love. Like, I didn't know you at the time. They're like, yo, B Love, you got to be B Love. I'm like, first of all, how can I get like what do I have to do so that a year from now, someone doesn't say my whole name and they just say whatever, G Money or something. That's what they call me in high school. So I'm like, this guy he's so famous. He has eliminated his first name and he just goes with first initial.
That's it.
So I said, I got to find out who this guy is. And so we got a chance to link up, and we didn't really talk too much there, but months later, we were able to reconnect and say, yo, let's just jump on and have a conversation. And that conversation gave wind to like, yo, like, this is actually fun. We don't know exactly what we're going to talk about, but by the time we're done, we're so glad we did it.
Yeah.
And so the idea was like, yo, why don't we just record our conversations? And again, we're going to steal a little bit of like Seinfeld. Seinfeld was a show about nothing. This is a show about something. The only thing is we don't know what the something is before we start.
That's right. We're not ashamed to admit it.
Yeah, no. But be love, like just talk about it from your perspective. I kind of gave people like kind of how this came about on my end, but just wanted to hear it from you.
Yeah, I have always wanted, I've had a series of accountability buddies as a professional, as an entrepreneur for a bunch of years. And I'm always interested in having a conversation with somebody I think is interesting. And I don't know how it exactly came to be, but through some email or another, as you sort of described, we got on one call. I can't even remember if there was a project behind that call, even in the very first time. But I've sort of looked at you have a way with metaphor and a way with words and insights that I find myself scribbling notes vehemently every time. Oh, there goes my light. Every time we get talking. So it just is a big part of my week I look forward to. And I know that if I have a project or if I have something to talk about, we're gonna start there, and then we're probably gonna go somewhere to talk about something. Yeah. And that's always pleasantly surprising. So, and I think that's worth capturing on video.
Let me tell you something. Like, and the guys, we don't know what we're gonna call this. We're calling this right now "Making Magic." And obviously B Love does magic, and so I'm sure at some point we'll talk about it. He got the cards out already, so he's hopefully show us something today.
But you just don't always get to see them, that's all.
Yeah, so he got something to say. But the one thing I realized, and this is something I learned from a mentor of mine, he was talking about Bono, the musician. He's a part of U2. Is it?
U2.
Am I good in that? All right, good. I didn't want to say that out loud and mess it up, but it's already out there. So he had a video that he played at one of his seminars that I attended, and he talked about one of the famous songs that they created. I forgot the name of it. It escapes me. But what he was saying was they actually, and this is probably why we're doing this, because somewhere in the back of my head, I was like, this is so dope. So what they did was they were struggling to produce a specific song. They decided to go and say, hey, let's just show up and just do something. I don't know what we're going to do today, but let's just show up and let's record the session, even though we don't know what we're going to produce. And so they record, and you see them struggling to produce it. And then I think at like minute 22, they found something, not even the whole song. They found something. They were like, ooh, that. And then they were like, what is it? Yeah, do that again. And they did it again. And they were like, we can add something to that now. And they added it. And I think it became like one of their number one songs of all time. But if you look at it, it took them sitting through mess for 21 minutes to find the magic in minute 22.
Brilliant.
And they didn't know they were going to do that. And so what I have found with the conversations we've had, and unfortunately we have not recorded them, which is why we're doing it now, is to make sure that the magic is captured, but it's also the belief system to believe that in these conversations magic will be born. We just got to create the space for that to happen.
Oh man, it's exactly, you're so eloquent as usual, but 100%. And this is something that I'm reminded of regularly in my life, but forget it just as much as I remember it. And like just starting something, just putting the wheels in motion without like detaching from the outcomes. This is something I'm learning. Like the real key to building confidence in anything is to detach completely from the outcome and just do something. And as we start getting the wheels churning, suddenly we look up and we found a something. And we can add to that something, and we can, begin to weave this tapestry of something bigger than ourselves that means something to somebody else and is pretty fun to do and make. So
that's well said. So tell me this, why do you think, with that topic in mind, why do you think people have such a hard time starting? Right. So if we're thinking about like the whole idea of, oh my gosh, the outcome. What you said just now is like the ability to detach yourself from the outcome, right?
mm-hmm.
And I think if we think about it, everyone would do if the outcome was guaranteed.
Absolutely.
Right? If I told you, hey, go knock on 100 doors and you're gonna get a yes, you will go knock on 100 doors, right? Because it's very specific, it's clear, you know, hey, that's a SMART goal or whatever. But what happens is when it's not that specific, you know, what do you do then? And it's easy to see, harder to have vision though. I think that's something Helen Keller talked about, right?
Absolutely.
You know, the worst thing is for somebody to have sight but not have vision,
not be able to.
And this is spoken from somebody who's blind,
right? Right.
Which made it stand out even more for me. And so, why do you think people have such a hard time wrapping their head around starting?
Yeah. Whew. I think you've already said it, like fear is the number one thing. Fear that you're not going to hit whatever expectation you have in your mind, or like that level of what it should be. Fear that you won't live up to somebody else's expectation. You know, so what do other people think will happen if I say I'm going to do this? But like all things, there's a role for faith and trust in this, right? And this is something, you know, I talk about a bunch, but the practice that we put into things yields results, but it's like growing hair, you know, it doesn't happen over a day. You don't notice the results until you've been doing it for 30, 60 days, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can build the practice of you trust, for example, like trust that the practice will yield results, trust that doing creates, and it becomes easier to do not knowing where you're going to go, I think. Now, that doesn't totally answer the question about why people still struggle to do it. And I think there's, maybe to wrap it around, I think there's a lack of trust. I think people aren't aware that really, once you just say yes, you're going to create, but it's just a matter of you saying yes. And I haven't experienced that first push into the realm of creating. And maybe part of that is, I think people don't realize they're already creating. Like, I think a lot of people live with life happening to them, or that's how they see it.
Yeah.
And they don't recognize their little choices, the little details are creating the bigger experience. And so they don't see their full creative power.
You said something that hit me.
Go on.
My gosh. So they don't realize they're already creating.
Right.
And there's a talk I give about the power of momentum and how we may not realize that when you said, you know, we already are creating, what is happening there though is that we're creating what we don't want.
Correct.
Still creating though. Like
that's
right.
Right.
So it's like, so we think like, oh, creating is always good or creating is always bad. No, you can create one or the other. The difference is the intentionality behind it. Right. So creating blindly, you end up, it's almost like saying somebody, hey, go draw something, but there's no lines, no nothing. And you're like, oh, okay, well, what the heck is that? Right. But I think when you're doing it on purpose, it changes the game. Like, right. You know, it changes. Hey, look at our guest. Our guest Cat is here.
Dobby. That's the magician's assistant right there. She'll be back, you know, I'm sure.
I'm sure. You know, so when we think about it from the creative perspective, and then you said lack of trust. And that was another thing I was going to talk about, is like, there is a lack of trust, but I also think the lack of trust is also rooted in the lack of truth. And what I mean by the lack of truth is that we always believed that creation was something that got done correctly the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, many people, I can even ask you, when you first tried your first magic trick, or when you knew this trick, I'm gonna do it. Do you remember, just so we could talk about it, do you remember what that trick is? And do you remember how long it took you to get it? The first time?
Yeah. There's one example I have that sticks out. So the first time I challenged myself really to learn a bit of sleight of hand.
What does that mean? So for the people who don't know.
So sleight of hand is using, sorry, my cat is just about to attack me again. Sleight of hand is using dexterity in the fingers to manipulate objects and playing cards to create the illusion of magic or some other effect going on.
Got you.
Sleight of hand is also a technique used by gamblers dirty gamblers, people who would cheat in a game of cards or something. And I never, as a kid, there's lots of magic tricks you can go buy in a magic store off the shelf, open the box, and be able to perform this thing. And that's where you develop this character for yourself. And that's where I'd perform most of my magic for a lot of my life. But then I saw this trick done by one of my teachers in person, and I didn't believe it was possible. I really felt the stretch of my own perception of possibility. And then he taught the method, and I thought that's why it's impossible. that technique is so challenging. But I said, I want to do it. Like that, it's just the outcome is too good. If I can do that from learning this, then I'll put in the work. And that was the first moment in the study of magic where I realized I was way underperforming, because it took me 6 months of every night putting in an hour to an hour and a half of this one move before I even felt comfortable. But I saw progress after the first week, and that was enough to propel more of that effort.
You saw progress, not perfection.
No, that's right.
Progress.
No, that's right. Progress.
Go ahead, keep going.
Progress. Yeah. And of course, off the bat, there's so much of that little voice sitting on the shoulder going, you suck, you can't do this. Look at that one. That was terrible. There's no way you're going to get that, right? Every possible negative bit of self-talk flies right through the ear.
6 months, every day, 60 to 90 minutes.
Yeah.
For one trick.
Yeah. One technique. Which I use in one trick. Yeah.
Got it. And I think what you said about the reason why it's so hard to start is because we don't understand what the outcome can produce. And it's not necessarily just the thing. It's the practice of the pursuit of it. What you download is those lessons, right? So what you did, and this is one of the things that attracted me to want to talk to you, is the fact that I've always been fascinated by skateboarders. Fascinated. Never will go. I'm not going on one.
Right.
But I'm fascinated by them. And what I was fascinated by is the fact that they will try, they'll break bones, they'll do all these things to hopefully capture themselves doing something one time on video to post it online. And I was like, who is that crazy to go and do that to themselves? And then a friend of mine who's a mentalist by the name of Michael Carl, very great guy, he told me about a quote by Penn Teller that said, magic simply is doing something that is, I think, unreasonable or something like that. I gotta find a quote. Let me go and find it. Penn Teller, this quote is so good. Let me magic quote. Hold on.
I feel like there's some pressure on me to know this already. I
No,
know I've heard it.
So he said, magic is just someone spending more time on something than anyone else might reasonably expect.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I heard that, I was like, wow, like, what are you talking about? But it's the in between. It's there's a poem or whatever called The Dash.
The dash.
And right. And it's like, hey, this is when you were born. This is when you die. The dash is where life happens. Right. And so I think almost in the making of magic, like we're talking about here, it's what do I get from the pursuit that is now something transferable that will allow me to basically have a Midas touch to say, I want this. And because I understand, like your example, you understood that impossible doesn't mean no.
Right.
Or it can't happen.
Right.
It just means it's a challenge to ask you, are you willing to spend more time than anyone else might reasonably spend to learn this technique? That's it. And those who are able to do that are the ones that we find to be able to get nicknames like B-Love. Right? Like you look at Michael Jordan and he's called MJ.
Right.
You don't call him Mike. Like you call Michael Jordan like MJ. That's it. Right. It's like you look at people like I was Googling this the other day. I saw this on my Instagram timeline that Pitbull, the music artist, how hard he worked, how much he did, built his career up to the point that now when you Google Pitbull, before the animal comes, he does.
Wow. That's cool.
Like when I like, and these are the things that now stretches my mind. There's a quote that says, once the mind is stretched, it will never return back to its original state.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And I think the beauty of magic, the beauty of seeing the stuff that you're doing is the ability to be able to see, to know that new realities can be created. And I think in the time that we're in now, recording this in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of, in the United States, at least one of the biggest, if not the biggest elections we've ever experienced.
Yeah.
All of these things, 200,000 deaths because of COVID-19, cases rising again, all these different things, that it's easy to lose hope in that something new can be created. And so when you talk about magic and why it's so important is that I think in this current climate right now, we need to believe that possibilities are still possible.
That's true words have never been spoken.
Like we need it like water, like not like food, because we could go without it for 3 days. I mean, water, like, we need it so much so. And so I think just talking through that, and I think it's a great topic to talk about just the process of creation, the process of being creative, which I think we all have been. We all have elements of it. But how do we develop that?
It's such an important thing. I'm so glad we're on this topic, man. This is my my favorite jam. This is my jam. Yeah, man. This is my favorite thing in the world to think and talk about, because I'm an educator by training, as you are as well, but I really, really believe that everybody has the ability to do so much more. I mean, this is just like a fundamental human truth that we're all underperforming. None of us have fully achieved or realized our potential. I mean, it's like the story of major Eastern philosophies and religions, right?
Right.
So, but it's, and myself included, I mean, I certainly haven't figured everything out, but I love thinking about ways to get more people to tap into their magic powers, right? Like their creativity. And you mentioned that Penn and Teller quote. I think that's exactly it. Like that is the real secret of magic, to plug my own stuff for a second, but it's practice. And then you see, like Kobe Bryant was a magician.
Yeah.
right? Michael Jordan, as you said, he was a magician. Greta Thunberg, the climate activist from Sweden, she's a magician, right? Her like practices, you can find her daily schedule online. And at 10 a.m. every day, she has poster making and distribution as part of her daily practice as an activist. Like, I just think it's amazing. It's paying attention to putting in that little bit of extra and paying attention to the details, right? The small decisions. That's where we can build a sense of empowerment. And that for years, you know, Joel, another NSLC facilitator, and we co-wrote a book about creativity.
Yeah, it's in my bookcase right there. Brain sprouting right there. I see it from here.
That's it, man. I'm so glad to be able to share it. It started as like a session we did with high school students because way back in the day, we knew creativity was important, but we were also believers that it didn't really matter. Like there's sometimes everybody knows creativity is important, but also people can't say why all the time. As it solves problems, like, because it leads to innovations. Yeah, not everybody's interested in innovations. But there's so much more benefits to creativity that's like under the surface, or that's indirect, a consequence of practicing creativity. So when you know, empowerment spills over from one area of your life to every area of your life. And from my own personal experience, when I'm feeling like the most in a funk, you know, if my mood takes a dive, if I'm in a bit of a state, which I've experienced a bunch over the last 6 months, choosing to do one thing, like having a cold shower, gives me the sense of empowerment that I need to take the next step, like to build momentum to do the next thing in my day. And
when you say a cold shower, like what did that do for you?
It's just something that I've had to do. And that I keep a promise to myself. So by engaging in one little practice, saying at the end of my shower, I'm going to turn the dial to cold. I'm just going to
How long you do that for? Because I'm curious. I might try it, but I'm a little scared I'm going to slip.
Try it for the first time for as long as you can handle it. That's what I suggest. And then the next day, add 5 seconds. Or 2 breaths, or however you want to measure your time.
I am going to do that today.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Don't tell anybody what time it is. I didn't take a shower yet. Don't judge me.
Good word, brother. Yeah, man. Again, this is a thing I read from like Wim Hof, the Iceman, this guy who has swam under, you know, ice, climbed Kilimanjaro wearing shorts and nothing else.
Wow.
He talks about cold as being therapeutic. It's merciless, but it teaches, he says.
Sheesh, that's so deep.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you just say yes. And you said yes once. If I say yes once to the cold shower, then I got like wind in my sails, right? And we've talked about this. Motivation follows the action. So if you are in the practice of creating on a daily basis, like the long-term impact of that is a broad sense of intrinsic motivation, a broader sense of like willingness to do stuff, and the sense that you can do stuff. And it doesn't have to be big. This is my philosophy anyway. I've yet to like test this in a lab, but I'm sure there's lots of evidence to support the idea that doing little things now will build the sense of empowerment later on.
Yeah, it's like the compound interest.
That's it.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I love the shower part. I'm gonna try it for sure. That's and it's interesting because the book I was reading, I was telling you about the 5 next big moves or whatever. He talked about those who are successful have the ability. Those who are highly successful have the ability to endure pain or some level of discomfort. And so like a cold shower for 2 breaths. I love your answer as well to my question about how long, because I think how long, that question, if we're honest, was me going back to outcomes.
Right.
I was like,
Right.
just tell me how long so I can hit a mark.
Yeah.
And your reply was anything but that, right? It wasn't so specific. It was like breaths, time, whatever.
As long as you can go.
As long as you can go, if it's a second, it's if a breath, then it's a breath more than the one you didn't do yesterday. And I think that's so powerful. And honestly, like, I've been thinking about a mission. Like, what's the mission I want to have? And one of the ones that came up to me was, I want to assassinate perfect culture. I want to assassinate it because I think too many of us are so afraid to fail that we never experience success.
Whew.
Like, it's so far from it. So many people. I had a young lady message me the other day, said, Gio, I read your book, Gem number 38. Did I send you my book by any chance?
No, I was gonna ask.
When we get off, I'm gonna send it to you.
Sweet.
It's right here. I'm gonna say it. So
sweet.
So she said, I've had a fear of driving for 8 years. In Gem 38, I said, you overcome your doubts by doing and getting off your butts. So the word doubt has do and but in it. So if you want to get over it, you do, and you let go of the buts.
That's awesome.
Right? Because anytime you use an excuse, if you're like, hey, B-Love tells me, Gio, take a cold shower. B-Love, I'll take the shower, but that's me about to enter an excuse.
Yeah.
Right. But what happens if you go in the shower and it's cold? Like, do you get hypothermia or something? Like, what do you like? So you start thinking, you started using the word but. Well, when she read it, she said, I just got to do. And she just messaged me and told me she got her driver's license.
Oh, sick.
And I'm like, hold on, 8 years. She said, now this, and here's the thing, when we bring it all full circle about practice. I asked her, now that you have your license, which is an outcome, I don't want you to miss what was the principle that you put in practice to get it, which was you doing and letting go of your butts. So now that you've conquered said fear, what others do you have that now, because you have a principle that has been practiced, can you now change? And she said, that's the most exciting part about it.
It's amazing.
Like, that's the most exciting part about it. And I think that's why, like, I'm so excited about you launching this this curriculum, teaching this stuff about creating magic and things like that, where you're working with people, young leaders, young people, so that they can get a touch of this. Because I think, like you said, it's not just from innovation. So it's not like, hey, let's be creative so that we can figure out how to make a car fly. But the other side of it is, and I wanted you to talk about this a little bit more, is like the idea of how creativity creates empowerment that touches everything else. And I was thinking, the reason why I thought about it is because innovation to my 70 plus old dad is not going to be something he cares about.
Right. Yeah.
But how do I get him to still think creativity is relevant to him, and not creativity being a young man's game?
Yeah.
Or a young lady's game. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Good question. I don't have a lot of experience in teaching seniors or adults. Well, I have a lot of experience teaching adults creativity, but certainly not retired folk. But the one study that lands well with adults is from 2006, and a bunch of adults were given the opportunity who identify with having anxiety or like higher than normal levels of anxiety. Were given a little therapy, art therapy. They were given a piece of paper, like paints, pens, markers, and just told to create something for 30 minutes. And their cortisol levels, saliva cortisol levels, were measured before this little therapy and then afterwards. And cortisol is a stress hormone. And stress is the number one killer, because everything is connected to it. All disease and illness connects back to the stress we put ourselves through. So everybody's got it. And 75% of people who did this art therapy, like, or it reduced, salivary cortisol levels by 75%.
Wow.
In people who created something without a purpose, just for the act of creating for like 30 minutes. And most people indicate in the study that they haven't done something like this since they were a kid, which is sad, but true, right? This is something that like reframes this childlike activity as something that's valuable for an adult. And then they also say, and I think I'm going to do more of it. Because it just takes one. So that one, like, that's just the benefit of the act of creating is intrinsically fills us with a sense of something. And not everybody can be sold on that, because it doesn't feel like it's really important, or it feels like maybe you can already do it. Like I can already get myself hyped up if I need to. There's a different sort of fulfillment that comes from creating that you don't experience until you take the leap of faith and create something.
Yeah.
The other like major benefit of creativity is what it does for relationships, I think.
Tell me more.
The more, a couple of reasons. One, to create effectively requires a safe space. And so if we're creating in a team environment, that means everybody on the team has to buy into the rules of the game and make that space safe if we're going to see that creativity. And when somebody volunteers an idea that's like not a good idea, not a perfect idea, to go along with this idea of assassinating the perfection ideal. If somebody says something that's like, no, that's clearly dumb, that's a terrible idea, but they're so comfortable saying it, that gives everybody else around the table permission to share the idea that's not perfect. And so the act of creating, I think if you could, extrapolate this from companies and small organizations to like how it can impact in a community. We have parents who are practicing creativity and modeling it for their kids. And you have bosses who are modeling what it's like to be creative in the process with their staffs. I think that could totally change the culture of the world. It can change the way that we view one another a little bit. It's empathy building. So there's that major benefit, I think. There's, I don't know what I would say to 70%. Like, it's energizing. If anybody wants energy, you can find it by doing, even though it takes energy to get the engine started.
No, that's huge. And to say, like, what's interesting is that it doesn't have to be big, right? So if it could be like my dad sending me a text message and putting an emoji in it. And to me, I'm like, what is he doing? But that could be like, look, like I found out this part of the keyboard on my phone and I did the emoji. Or one time he told me, hey, this is pre-COVID. He was like, I went to the library and I took a Photoshop class. And I was like, are you getting into photography or something? And he was like, I mean, I got time. Like, I don't know if I'm getting into photography, but I just know like they were offering a class and I went. And I think the lifelong learner part, what we forget is if you want your life to be long, learn. If you break that word up, if you break it up and say lifelong learner, I think some of the biggest gems I've ever heard in life was just saying stuff slowly. Because when I say lifelong learner, I can go over it and not realize, well, if I want life to be long, learn.
Oh yeah.
If you just slow it down. And so I love the creativity aspect of it. I think the small things can become bigger things. We think small things don't matter, but then it's like, okay, well, walk around with a pebble in your shoe and tell me if that's comfortable. Or tell me how big is the hinge compared to the door.
That's so good. That's so good.
We keep thinking it's the big things, and it's really not. Like, it's a little screw that holds your watch in place and all these different things. So what are some questions that somebody can ask to immediately put them into a state of creativity? And obviously you didn't know this question was coming up, but I'm just curious, like, Is there something that can,
I got a great,
give me, yeah.
I got a couple of things that I like to practice. One is change your F word. Not that one.
Change your F word. Ooh,
not that one.
Listen, that would go well in schools.
It goes a long way.
Change your F word, and and it's like, not that one.
Not that one. I get to swear without swearing in a way. It's kind of fun. But it's actually from a book, The Art of Possibility, by Benjamin Zander and Rosamund Zander, his wife. Benjamin was the director of the Boston Philharmonic. I could be wrong about the city, but or a conductor, like a musical composer guy. And he's got a great TED Talk. He's all about, building possibility in people. It's such a great book. But I didn't actually learn the technique from that book. I found out it was there later. I learned it from a mentor of mine. I was having an argument with somebody at school. I was back in high school, and later that day I had to go and meet with this mentor, and I was like, oh, it's so frustrating. Like, how can he not understand what I'm saying? And Alex was like, change your F word. You're using the wrong F word. You say you're frustrated, you're going to stay there. Like, instead of saying, how frustrating, say, how fascinating that he can't understand me, even though I think I'm being as clear as I can be. And it was like, wow. Every time I now catch myself saying or noticing the feeling of frustration or annoyance or anger or hurt, even sometimes, I'm like, okay, what's there to be fascinated by here? What's there to learn in this situation? And wow. And you can take that mentality. You can look at anything. One of my favorite activities to inspire a sense of awe or wonder is like, look at a flower. Just look at one for a minute, 2 minutes. Stare at the details. Notice what you notice. And my bet is you land on a place of appreciation, like total fascination by this natural wonder that's right inches from your nose. And you can do it with anything. You could stare at the microphone and start to think about how many people were involved in the creation of the mic, from design to manufacture to mining the materials. And one thought leads to the next, and suddenly we're off to this place of inspiration and creative appreciation. So that's one angle I like is changing your F word. The other one is what if, just the most powerful words in pursuit of any possibilities. You hear yourself, you listen to all the I can't, all the self-doubt, all the I could make a list of all the things I want in my life, but all those buts. Then you say all the buts and then go, yeah, but what if? And then do. It's like the door opener.
Yeah, what if? I love the fascinating, frustrating part of it, because I think creation can be frustrating, right? Because we can control ourselves in the time, but we can't control the time.
That's right.
So you're like, hey, make it go faster. And it's like, the more you keep saying, make it go faster, the more frustrated you get.
That's it.
About it. So letting go of that need to control, need to know aspect. And the fascinating part, because when you said that, I was like, I have found myself to be annoyed at knowing stuff that I think is common sense. Where I'm like, how you don't know this already? Yeah. Like, sheesh. And sometimes I could get caught up, and then my ego and me being prideful and saying this. And then one time, a friend of mine told me, Gio, I'm fascinated by what you know. And it's essentially the same conversation, except that she was present to me venting about my frustration on someone else and saw what I saw as frustrating to be fascinating.
Cool.
And I was like, she was like, oh my God, like this is like, wow, that's so fascinating. You could do that. And I'm like, I'm frustrated they can't.
Uh-huh.
And so at that point, it's really where the question of change your F word is really rooted in shifting your focus.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So one you could choose one F produces,
That's it.
gives me hope.
Yeah.
The other F gives me hopelessness in myself and the person I'm talking about.
Right. That's it. Exactly. It goes all the way.
It goes all the way. It's
Yeah.
so blends into other things that it makes that quote that says how you do some things is how you do everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that a lot of people say, and I think that there's a ripple effect to it, but the ripple effect is almost like a domino. There's a book called The One Thing by Gary Keller or something like that. Not Gary Keller, but somebody, I forgot. He's like a famous real estate guy.
Cool.
And his whole thing is about if you have a row of dominoes, what starts the chain of them knocking them down is the first one going down.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can knock the first domino, no matter how big the other dominoes are thereafter, they will fall, but they require that small domino to move in order for the other ones to be obedient and follow it. So we think it's like the big thing. It's like that whole David and Goliath. And sometimes we don't realize that we don't have to be Goliath to have an amazing impact. I think Malcolm Gladwell wrote the book, David and Goliath.
Yeah.
Something like that in there, but
I haven't
it's
read
powerful.
It myself, but...
Powerful, man. So many good stuff in terms. So what are you working on? Like, what are you working on? Like, let's bring it. Like, what are you working on? I know you have Egypt. Is it Egypt?
Yeah, we're 1 week in on the leadership course I'm doing for students in Egypt at a British school there, in a pilot format. And what's been fascinating is, I'm building trust again in the system, right? I'm putting trust in my own practice of doing stuff and figuring it out as you go. It's just something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I just never made the deadline for myself to create it. And the opportunity came up in September. It's like, okay, I'll say yes, build a pilot program, and I'll make it happen. Yeah, of course, I'm making it happen. And so every week I need to put together my slides. I'm doing it week by week, and I think, I want information. I want a survey. It's like, I have to create a survey now. So that's the one thing it's like restoring my confidence, that starting leads to confidence. Like I'm in the loop, which is great. And then I get to read these surveys. That's the other part. So the actual content itself that I'm delivering, it's getting good feedback, and I hope people will find it really valuable. Once we get in next week, we start talking about creativity. Last week,
what was the first week about? What did you talk about in the first week?
The products of practice, actually.
Got it.
Yeah.
So good stuff.
And I'm so excited. I gave everybody the assignment of practicing writing with their non-dominant hand for 2 minutes every day for the next week. So 7 days. Yeah. I don't know what that like, it's a silly thing to introduce the idea of introducing a practice and like feeling all those initial frustrations of failing or being bad at something. But hopefully in a non-threatening context for students where they don't really care if they suck at it as well. But I'm excited to have a little conversation about that.
You got to tell me how that goes, because it is, and we had talked about this last week, but like is one of those mundane, it don't matter, it's not going to make or break anything. But if we think about it, I never told you this, but there was one time I took a test in college, right? And I was trying to finish this test very quickly. And so as I was doing it very quickly, like I write with my right hand, that's the neatest one. But I also know how to write with my left hand. It's just not as neat.
Okay, cool.
That's awesome. So I started writing and my hand started hurting. And so I decided to give it a break and use the left one. Right? So now when I go and use the left one, the teacher gave me my grade back and I had everything checked off correct, but received an F in the assignment. And I was like, why did I get an F in the assignment? And the teacher said, because clearly you cheated because 2 people took this test.
Oh, no way.
And I was like, no, that's not true. Like, I can write with both. And she's like, that's not true. There's no way you cheated. And so I said, give me, like, I can, like, please, I'm telling you, I did not cheat. Like, I can do it right now. I can show it to you. And I had to fight for that, for my life. And I showed it. And the teacher was like, oh, you can do it with both hands. And I was like, I've always bragged about it, right? So like, it depends on what room I'm in. So I've heard like Oprah and Obama writes with their left hand. So if I ever want to impress somebody, I just say, hey, I have something in common with Oprah and Obama. And they're like, what is it? And I'm like, we write with our left. Like, we write with our left hands. And I can get away with it. But when you said like something so mundane, 5 days, 7 days, I thought about, what if they did go a little bit further and kept on playing, right? Kept on playing with it. And then they actually get to a point like me where you can take your time off and let the left hand go and write. Think about what that does when I've never been fearful about breaking my hand.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, if my right hand, my dominant hand is broken, I'm okay because I've done something with the non-dominant hand. And so think about psychologically what that can do for someone to know I'm not broken. I'm not breakable.
Right. Yeah. Like, man, I think it's such a great point. There's a legitimate psychological ease that happens in the unconscious that you wouldn't even notice how it was transforming your day to day. Like,
telling you,
that's so cool.
I'm going out today. I'm going to drive with my left hand today too. Like and again, it's now, look how much fun life could be when you're essentially doing what you taught them in week 1 and start asking yourself the question of, what can I practice today? Versus not what can I be perfect at? What can I practice today that is just, doesn't matter, but in the grand scheme of things, we know it does. In some way, shape, or form. You just don't know how is it going to show up.
Yeah,
and
that's it.
When I heard you say the exercise, it just really took me back to that F that I got in that test.
That's so great.
And I was like,
awesome
sheesh,
story.
like that is such a powerful story, because I think what we're all hoping to be is unbreakable.
Amen.
But what if it's an art? Right? And that's the beauty of it, is I think you can become unbreakable. You can be practicing so much so that I think that it almost could be looked at as what Penn Teller talks about, like, just beyond anyone's scope. Like, why would you go to that extreme? Like, you don't have to go take a shower and do cold water for 2 breaths. Like, it's not going to be noticeable to everyone else. But then at the same time, how do you know? Like you don't know how does that reset my mind or reshapes it to be able to go and do something else that you're like, wow, I can't believe you did that. And I could go and tell you it started off with 2 breaths in the shower in cold water.
Yes, sir.
And it's like those connecting points. Steve Jobs has a quote that says, we can never see the connecting points going forward, but we always see them going back.
Yes.
And so being able to like see those things and be like, oh, snap. And so for everybody who's just watching this, we've been almost on for an hour, but like, I just hope like by the end, that this conversation has gotten you for you to get to a place where you're like, wow, like no longer be flustered, frustrated by blank pages. No longer be flustered by the idea of I don't know, and almost like relish in not knowing.
Yeah,
I don't know. Relish in the what ifs, like the imagination and what could be possible, and changing your F word from frustrating to fascinating
Mm-hmm.
and incorporating what B Love talked about when you talk about like the what if, right? And it's what you put in between, right? So it's like, I talked about doubt and overcoming it is you do and let go of the buts, but in between that, it's the what if will help you,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like the excuse, and then you say, but what if I,
Mm-hmm.
and that what if can lead to the do.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're honest, and I'm not going to take nobody, like honestly, we have heard so many, they call it ants. I think it's called automatic negative thoughts or something.
Oh yeah.
It's good.
I like
ants.
that. Yeah.
So we have so many of those, right? That you're scared to post on social media because somebody's going to say you can't match.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know. You're not good at fashion. Or what if I post something and I only get one like? Does that mean everyone thought this was horrible?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're so rooted in like thinking from a glass half empty perspective
Mm-hmm.
that we need to now almost double up the what ifs to override the amount of the buts and the no's we've heard. And some of the no's we've heard growing up are rooted in people who were taking care of us, providing some form of protection.
Mm-hmm.
But protection also is based off your perspectives as well. And they only had a certain amount of perspective and perception.
Mm-hmm.
So they applied it to you in hopes of protecting you, but not realizing the promise that was ahead of you if you were able to let go of that a little bit. And so it's on us to not hate our parents for protecting us, but also growing up and exploring what is outside of that bubble that they created for us.
Love it. I love it. That was the one final thing you mentioned, and I say this a lot, magic reminds us that we're always missing something.
Sheesh. I remember you said that last week.
Yeah.
Dang it.
Magic is mystery, and we love to feel like we know things. We love to feel like we got it all figured out, but the truth is we don't, and our best guesses are only that, best guesses. And at first, that thought I find is really uncomfortable, right? Because it forces us into a place of we've lost some ground. What we know is what we stand on. But with a little bit of practice with the thought, we can grow comfortable in the discomfort. And that's when, creativity just thrives, because the outcomes are unpredictable in some sense and immeasurable.
I want what you just said. I want immeasurable success.
That's it.
I know we talk about SMART goals and M stands for measurable. I want the type of success you cannot measure.
Right.
I
love it. I love it.
That's another level. And so, man, this is super exciting, man. Like I'm glad we got a dope hour in.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
A whole
with our backgrounds and everything.
Our backgrounds, I don't know. I might switch it up on you guys. This was shout out to the company, but I love it. You got the library today. Who knows? So next episode, tune in, and who knows where we'll be.
Who knows? We'll find something, I'm sure.
We'll find something. Be creative with our backgrounds, but again, the whole hope is to inspire people, period. Sure. Whether that's creativity, whether it's trying, whatever it is, we don't know, the magic is in the fact that we're going to keep making it. One of the things that's something I don't mean to double down on this, but like there was something I was thinking about, and just to be transparent, because I think sometimes when people do stuff like this, they always come off like an expert. And sometimes what happens is we often know there are less experts than whoever's not an expert, right? So there's more followers than there are leaders, or whatever the case may be.
Sure.
So I was sitting down and I was like, man, I want to be an influencer. Like I want to get like a following. I want to swipe up on Instagram if I get 10,000 followers or something.
Yeah.
And then as I was thinking about it, I was talking to my wife yesterday as we went to go get some healthy foods and stuff. And I said to her, babe, I want to build a brand, but I have a big problem that's going to hinder me building it. She said, what is it? I said, Well, as much as brand building is creativity, what I've realized is the C in brand building that I struggle with the most is consistency. And it's crazy because consistency is not sexy, but is a necessity, right? So if you told me like, hey, Gio, I did 90 minutes every single day for 6 months, you were consistent, right? Like, and what happens is when someone sees you master that technique, they're in awe, but awe is spelled show up every day. Like that was the awe. It's like, yo, he kept on showing up. And so just to let everyone who's listening to this, like, show up, like show up, whatever that looks like for you. Our goal, myself, B-Love, our goal is not to define that for you. It's for you to define it for yourself, and be okay with changing the definition of it as you go.
I love it. I love it. Jump in and play.
Yeah, play. But no, this was been great, man. I'm looking forward to doing it next week again.
Yeah.
We'll touch base. We'll figure out when that's going to happen.
So cool.
But this was cool, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do something with the recording, and maybe I'll just start a YouTube channel.
Yeah, we could do that. That'd be perfect.
That's easy. All right, man.
All right, bro.
Thanks for your time.
All right, take care, man.
Take care. Talk to you soon.
All right, peace.